Hello, and a very warm welcome back to my channel. This is Laith at Impact Skills Training. So today, it's a very powerful piece. We're talking about the power of the pause. Now, you've heard me talk about the pause before in context with your voice, inflection, the speed, non-words, and so on. But now, I'm generally just going to cover the pause itself, just to demonstrate that silence is golden and how pauses really do help elevate what you've just said or what you're about to say. So pausing has many powerful benefits when it comes to presentations, any kind of communication. In fact, if you take presentations as one element of communication, they are hugely, immensely powerful. The downstream outcomes of pausing well through a presentation really does come back with the feedback that that was a great presentation. And some people can't put their finger on it. But one thing I know for sure, when you pause well and you pause deliberately without it looking staccato or staged, it really does help. Now, I'm overemphasizing them for the benefit of this little video, but pausing not only helps your audience just digest and process what you've just said, but pausing fractionally longer than you're comfortable with really does create a little bit of anticipation for what's to come next. Now, in a normal business presentation, that works. It works every single time, and it works very well. When you start to elevate your skills and use storytelling as part and parcel of your presentation to demonstrate a point, to bring to life a particular message that you're trying to share, then pausing has even more gravitas and is even more powerful in a storytelling element as part of a business presentation, by the way. So let's dive into pausing, what it does for you as the presenter, and perhaps more importantly, or at least equally importantly, what it does for the audience, your audience, in terms of how they can follow and how well they follow what you're talking about. So let's have a look at the screen. I'm just going to share a slide with you. I wouldn't normally, sometimes I just chalk it up on the flip chart. Sometimes I do it on the screen. It depends on the context. But this time I'm just going to share it on the screen. So let's have a look at that right now. Now, of course, pausing is everything to do with your voice, what we can and what we can't hear. But just to put that into the right context, the right environment, as it were, your voice is a beautiful musical instrument. There are thousands of singers from pop to rock to opera that use this beautiful musical instrument to elevate our mood, to change the mood, good or bad. And it all comes through the power of their voice, the speed, the pitch, the tone. And as you can see here on the screen, it's exactly 3 or 4 of those elements. So volume, as you've heard me say before, they must be able to hear you. That's number one, of course. The pace, the pitch, these are also important in terms of what are you doing with this musical instrument? What are you doing with your voice in order for you to be more engaging with your audience and, frankly, much more entertaining, in the sense that not entertaining in the classic manner, but entertaining in the sense that it becomes a more engaging communication or presentation. And part of that is for you to ensure that you captivate your audience through an interesting, frankly, voice that has peaks and troughs, that changes the pace slow and fast and changes the pitch. And of course, the volume can be very high, it can also be very low, but be aware, too low, people can't hear you. So this, of course, has its own little menu where both the volume can be louder and quieter, as I've said, the pace can be faster and slower, and of course, the pitch could be higher, it could be lower. So lots of different things you can do with your voice. Now, let's move on to the pause, or what I like to call the power of the pause. Just as an observation, you can see here that I've put this huge logo, if you like, of the pause. That is a visual anchor. And the reason I do that is so next time we think about the pause, or when you're practicing or rehearsing for your presentation in a real room with people, or to a camera or several cameras in the room, depending on how you've built your environment, then this is something to consider when it comes to practice and rehearsal. The pausing is really important. Just shut your mouth, say nothing, Feel the pain and do it anyway, as they've said, as that's the book title. And I would suggest extending the pause for slightly longer than you're comfortable with, particularly when you're practicing or rehearsing. And the reason I say that is because when you're practicing and rehearsing, you're in a much more safe environment, a much more comfortable environment. So you're able to extend the boundaries, push yourself outside your comfort zone. Remember, we learn nothing, zero, inside our comfort zone. We just get better at what we can already do. And that's fantastic if you haven't got a growth mindset. If you've got a fixed mindset, you will do that. If you've got a growth mindset, we'll do that in another video. Your ability to expand outside your comfort zone is where that growth comes from. So back to pausing, I would start, and I would suggest certainly start to pause for a little bit longer than you're comfortable with. Because most of us, when it gets to the real scenario with real people in front of us, or a couple of hundred people on a virtual call, we're more nervous and more anxious, and we're much more likely to just contract that pause and shorten it because we just want to get on and get going. I've even heard people feedback saying, I just want to get it over and done with. Well, getting it over and done with suggests that one, perhaps you haven't practiced and rehearsed as much as you'd have liked to. And I know pressures of the real world mean we just have to fit it in when we can. But it also comes across to the audience. So stay away from the mindset of, I just want to get it over and done with. Remember, the audience are there to listen to you. You are the subject matter expert in the room, and you are there to share some valuable information. You're giving them a gift, effectively. So back to the pausing. Let me just put in some of these things here for you. Now you'll see that for you and for your audience, the benefits of the pauses are for both of you. So if we focus on what's for you, it helps you to breathe and relax. When you breathe and relax, you're far more able to think more clearly. And as it says here, to articulate what you need to say more clearly, because you're now reoxygenating your brain. When you reoxygenate your brain, it just has that blood going, that blood flows more easily. You've got more oxygen in your brain, which helps you think more clearly, which helps you articulate what you need to say. It helps you gather your thoughts. When you pause, you think about what you need to say next without just blurting out whatever is on the next slide or the next bit of flip chart. So it helps you to think about what you've got to say next. It's much more deliberate. It's much more poised to move purposely. So in other words, if you're going from the slides, from your laptop or over to the screen, or maybe you've got an object or you're demonstrating something, use that as an opportunity to pause. So rather than talk through it, the next time you want to go back and show them something on the screen, just use that as an opportunity to say nothing. So take a couple of steps back in silence. And here you see A, B, C, X, Y, Z, whatever you're talking about. Then pause again. Come back to your laptop or to the camera. In and of itself, that 1 second, couple of paces back or forward is a pause. And it helps people just hear the silence, and that's important. Moving with purpose. Change pace or direction. So if I want to share a story with a punchline, I might just deliberately pause for a little bit longer in order to cause that anticipation. Or perhaps I'm going to pick up an object to demonstrate something. So that is in itself a pause. So I might pick up my bell. I use this on some of the training just for a bit of fun. Now I've picked it up, I'll ring it. And in silence, I've put it back. I don't need to speak for every second. If I can find an excuse to have a pause, I'll use it to my advantage. It then helps me just think about what I'm going to say next. Helps me breathe, as the first point says on there. That really does help. It reoxygenates your brain, as I said. And then time for tech. And what I mean time for technology, when you're in the virtual space or in person face-to-face, but particularly in the virtual space. It's really important to make sure, and it's a cliche, I know, but everybody's on the same page. Now, I've worked with 300 or 400 people on one virtual call, ranging from Asia right across to the US. So the time of that call has to be quite particular, because some of them will be having their very first coffee for breakfast in the morning, and some will be putting their kids to bed and it's dinner time. So energy levels are important. Making sure the message is clear and articulated well is very, very important. Now, what I mean about tech is in some parts of the world, as well as others, the technology differs. You've got to remember, this is coming through, this little lapel mic is going through a transmitter onto the computer. That computer is sending it through my broadband, through a Wi-Fi box. It's then going up to a satellite somewhere in the sky, bouncing off probably a number of satellites, coming down the other side into somebody else's office or house, through their Wi-Fi router, through their laptop, and through their speakers. That's a really long journey for a Wi-Fi signal to travel. But more importantly, I don't know how long that journey is. For some, it could be very quick. For some, it could be very slow. So pausing allows technology, if it's buffering or there's a slight delay, 1, 2, 3 seconds, means that by pausing for 1, 2, 3 seconds deliberately, everybody's caught up and everybody is on the same page, particularly when it's in the virtual space. So be aware of that. Have frequent breaks, short breaks. If you've got a 1-hour presentation, I would suggest at least 1 break, if not 2. 2 breaks every 20 minutes, just for a comfort break for 90 seconds a minute. That way everybody has had a chance to do what they need to do. They come back re-energized, they've popped to the loo, they've got a drink of water, whatever it might be. And that in itself is a pause. It's a minute, 90 seconds, 2 minutes. Helps everybody gather their thoughts again. So there's lots of ways to pause for you. For you, as I say, the main driver here is to reoxygenate your brain, and also for you to gather your thoughts, to think very clearly about what you need to say. Now, what are the advantages for your audience? Now, you've probably been reading them, but let's go through them one by one, as it were. So for your audience, yes, time to digest and to process the information they've just heard. If you're going too fast and you're throwing words out at 180 words a minute, far too quickly, far too much information, too little time, and nobody's been had time to process it and digest it in the time possible. Too much information. TMI. Too much information compressed into too little time. Your audience have not had time to digest or process that. And ultimately, it's going to be too much, particularly if it's a 20-minute, half an hour presentation. They won't have had time to process and digest it. They'll miss half of it, and they'll come away from that presentation and think, whew, what was that about? Did you get what he or she was saying? Did you have time to write notes? No. Did you? No. All right. So time to process, time to digest for your audience. It feels less rushed. So if you are one of those professionals and speakers or presenters in a business context, you happen to be in marketing or HR or finance or supply chain, doesn't matter. If you are one of those professionals, slow down, take a pause. Because for your audience, if you're rushing and not pausing, for them, it was rushed. And when we've had audiences, witness a presentation like that, they say, oh, it was just too fast. Felt really rushed. And that's the last bit of feedback you want. You want them to understand what you're saying. Otherwise, why are you there in the first place? You want to share the information so that they understand it and go away with a few action points to implement and apply whatever it is that you're sharing with them. Creates anticipation. If you're sharing a story particularly, this works really well. You've only got to look at some of the greats out there from Disney and all the other film producers out there. Anticipation, pausing, creates a bit of tension, and you need that tension in order to draw your audience in, to get them engaged and captivate them. So that does really work. Create anticipation by pausing for your audience. It allows them to take notes and to process the information. I can't say that, importantly enough. It really is an important piece. The point of you having that information or having that presentation is to share valuable information. And presumably then, for them to note it down or type it into their iPad or whatever device they've got. If you're not giving them time to do that, yes, you can print out the notes and they can read it later. But there's nothing like a live interaction to embed that information and to internalize it. Later, by a day or two later, they've had 3 or 4 other meetings. Your meeting, your presentation is now at the back of their mind. It's not at the forefront of their mind, and a lot of the information would have been lost, even if they've got the notes. In the live environment, it's far more effective, far more powerful. So give them the opportunity then to process and internalize information. It's very, very powerful. And again, as you see from there, is also time for them, for their technology to catch up. So technology is important in the virtual space. We all know that. We've all experienced problems with delays, buffering, you name it, and so on. But also in the real room with real people in person in front of you. Give them time to process, to gather, to consider questions, to consider thoughts. And all of that comes in either during the presentation or later when they ask you questions, the Q&A session. Now, I'm not a fan of leaving Q&A till the end. We'll come on to Q&A on another video. But if you give them time to consider and thought, as long as you've planned that into the time allocation that you've got, this interactive Q&A is very, very useful. It's in the moment, not 30 minutes later or an hour later when they can't remember the question anymore, or the question they had is no longer relevant because things have moved on. So pausing, back to the main point here, allows them time to think about and consider what you've just in order to process that information to come out with a question. And you want questions. That's the whole point of your presentation. They're interested, they're intrigued, they're curious about what you're saying. So give them the time and space through pauses to formulate a question, to come up with something that's interesting. And that, frankly, other people in the room may also be considering. So it just enriches your presentation. That whole tapestry of interaction, discussion, and questioning really does make it a much more memorable experience. So that is a very, very good reason in and of itself to pause when you're given presentations. So remember, the power of the pause, both for you as the presenter, very, very useful, and of course, for your audience, very, very useful. Take care. If you've got any questions at all, please put them in the comment box below. If you've got stories to share about how you've paused and how it's worked for you, I'd be delighted to hear them. And it's also very useful for this community because we can all learn from each other. This is how this stuff works. So please put them in the comment box. I'd be delighted to read them. And I always answer all of them. All right. Take care. Have a fantastic week. I'll look forward to seeing you on the next video. Bye for now.